Introduction to Alienated Martial Arts. In the late Zhou Dynasty, feudal lords and warlords were divided, and natural and man-made disasters occurred frequently, making it difficult for the people to survive. There are also various gates sending mountains into the world, and the great masters of good and evil mutate and become eerie, stirring up the world and scattering blood and rain. Wei Tao brought a casual martial arts game program into the chaotic world, step by step stepping onto the peak, and creating his own extreme path legend. I have completed this novel with 5 million words, and my character can be guaranteed. Book enthusiasts can rest assured to consume it. Chapter 1. Chaotic Era. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dark clouds are low, and mountain rain is about to come. A whirlwind blew by, rolling up a large canopy of dust, adding a faint yellow mask to the entire long street. The air is filled with a strong smell of decay, and in this hot and oppressive weather, it hits the forehead, making people feel nauseous. The roadside vendors began to tidy up their stalls, striving to return home before the heavy rain arrived. After collecting the few herbs that had not been sold, Wei Tao looked up at the increasingly gloomy sky and quickly left with his package on his back. He was just over 1.6 meters tall, with a thin and small figure. He was wearing a noticeably wide coarse cloth garment, which looked like he was wearing a burlap bag from a distance. Leaving the long street, turning into a small alley, and a few hundred meters away, you can return home. Surrounded by dilapidated low-rise bungalows, it contrasts sharply with the red bricks and green tiles on both sides of the long street, not to mention the deep mansions and courtyards where the wealthy live in the inner city. They are completely different worlds. Leaving over a puddle of sewage on the ground, Wei Tao frowned slightly and his gaze fell on a piece of rotting and frothy finger, accelerating his already slow pace. The silence around him made him feel a bit nervous. If it weren't for his fear of getting wet from the hard-picked and sun-dried herbs, he wouldn't want to take a shortcut and cross these gloomy and narrow alleys. I heard that the Wei gang, which was originally stationed nearby, provoked a nobleman in the inner city. The leader, along with several gang members, evaporated directly, leaving no one alive or dead. Suddenly, a great chaos erupted in this area, and the flames of several forces will continue until the dust of territory ownership is settled. The common phenomenon in the outer city is that various guilds dominate the market, occupying their own territory or monopolizing a certain industry, forming a fragile dynamic balance in battles and killings. Even the poor people who make a living by collecting herbs and firewood, there are brave and ruthless people who have established a medicine gang. Although the medicine gang has no territory in the city, it runs rampant in the mountains outside the city. The medicine farmers must submit a monthly offering, otherwise their personal safety in the mountains cannot be guaranteed. This is the great Zhou Dynasty, in the second year of the Qianfu reign. A chaotic era characterized by the decline of imperial power, the self-reliance of military governors, frequent wars, and the unbearable livelihood of the people. Wei Tao has been in this distant city for almost half a year, from being confused and helpless at the beginning to reluctantly accepting it later, and having to work hard for survival. He can no longer see the shadow of the former 996 programmer. He let out a deep sigh, tightened his backpack, and suddenly stopped in front of a pile of garbage. Two figures, one tall and one short, jumped off the wall and blocked his way, one in front and one behind. They each held a wooden stick in their hands, with rusty iron nails clearly visible at the top. "Brother, borrow 2 copper coins to spend money. We are members of the Hidden Knife Society, so we can be considered friends. I don't even have a real knife, and I still have the face to say that I am a member of the Hidden Knife Society." Wei Tao remained silent for a moment, but still took off the burden on his back and opened his palm, revealing 2 blackened copper coins. After squatting at the market for an afternoon and selling for so little money, if the 2 big brothers don't mind, they can take the herbs from their bags. If you borrow 2 copper coins, you only have 2 copper coins. It's unlucky. The tall man cursed softly, turned around and took a few steps, but then turned back and took the 2 copper coins from his hand, spitting heavily on the ground. After both of them left, Wei Tao's tense body slowly relaxed. He let go of the medicine shovel hidden in his sleeve, and reached out to catch a drop of rainwater. Fortunately, these two people only took the copper coins and left without getting angry and taking action against him. If he really wanted to take action, he might be able to kill one with a medicine shovel hidden in his sleeve, but as long as he was hit by a wooden stick, even if it didn't hit the key point, that rusty nail could still take his life. The heavy rain poured down, and even people carrying bags were instantly drenched. The dried herbs are still soaked in water. After a few days of hard work, I just brewed soup like this. Wei Tao carried the package dripping down, but he didn't feel too sad. Because life is so difficult, when you find it difficult to accept or even understand, you can only calm down and persevere, hoping for a turning point. He believes that his turning point has always been there. But I have never been able to find its usage method. That is a golden rune that comes with my journey. Only when he gathers his own spirit can he perceive the golden symbol that others cannot perceive at all. It has been spinning slowly all along, and after a while, it will give itself a gold coin. In half a year, he has accumulated 6 gold coins, averaging 1 per month. However, gold coins are also illusory, so there is no possibility of them being used. Otherwise, just by being able to take out one, life can be greatly improved, and there may even be an opportunity to seek a living in the inner city and escape from the dangerous and oppressive quagmire of the outer city. After being soaked in the rain and dazed for a while, he waded through the muddy sewage, walked through this alley, turned 2 more turns, and finally returned home. This is a narrow courtyard, with a leaking stone house that has been in disrepair for a long time. Several small and medium-sized puddles have accumulated on the ground. The rest of the family had not returned yet, so Wei Tao put down the soaked package and turned to the stove to start a fire. Pouring water, boiling a pot, adding a few handfuls of aged rice, and cutting some wild vegetables that were dug up while picking herbs, can even solve the problem of dinner at night. Eating dry rice is impossible. On such a night without labor, having a bowl of rice soup to fill the stomach is already the result of the family's joint efforts and struggle. When the aroma of rice began to permeate, the courtyard door outside Zhaosuiyuan.com creaked. A middle-aged couple walked in with a young girl. They are Wei Tao's parents and sisters. Wei's parents mainly make a living as carpenters, and when they can't get a job, they can only go up the mountain to chop firewood and collect medicine, struggling to maintain the daily expenses of the family. However, recently my sister Wei Hong found a job in a jade workshop through connections, and calculated that she would earn a lot more money than picking herbs, and it was more stable. Even after tidying up, she settled in. Today is her monthly break, and her parents are worried that it may be dangerous for her to come back alone. Therefore, they set aside half a day early to take her back home from the jade workshop near the inner city. The dried herbs are all soaked through. Wei Tao set the dishes on the table and lit the only oil lamp at home. Wei Fu was slightly taken aback, then showed a gentle smile and said, "If you get wet, just turn back and dry in the sun. As long as you don't get cold, it's good." Sister Wei Hong took out an oiled paper bag from a coarse cloth pocket and a clay jar, emitting a faint aroma of wine. "Little brother, I received my wages for the first time today and specially bought you pig head meat, which weighs half a pound." Wei Mu washed 2 wine cups, one handed to Wei Rongxing, and the other was placed in front of Wei Tao. "Take a sip of xiaojiu to warm up your body, otherwise you'll catch a cold. Brown rice porridge, mixed with wild vegetables, a mouthful of braised meat and a mouthful of wine." These seemingly ordinary things from the past appeared so delicious on this cold rainy night. Halfway through the meal, Wei Fu, who had a low tolerance for alcohol, blushed. He picked up half of the pork head and chewed it carefully in his mouth for the first time. After being silent for a long time, he suddenly said, "All the money our family has accumulated over the years is enough to pay for Brother Tao's apprenticeship at the martial arts school." Chapter 2. Martial Arts School. You are listening at novel full.audio. Under the dim oil lamp. Wei Tao's heart moved as he looked up at the old and tired middle-aged man. Half a year has been enough for him to obtain a lot of information, including the recently mentioned apprenticeship. In this world, there really exist warriors who are far more powerful than ordinary people. It's like the leader of the medicine gang in the Hengqing Mountain, who is a skilled expert who can keep up with 10 enemies, so he can gather a group of subordinates and establish a relationship with a nobleman in the inner city to control the entire herb business in the outer city. When Wei Tao went to pay the monthly allowance, he had seen with his own eyes that the leader of the medicine gang whipped his leg and cut off the thick wooden stake at the mouth of the bowl. The use of the chain leg technique behind him was even more like a peacock opening its screen, making people dizzy without distinguishing between true and false. It is said that these warriors have unique cultivation methods that stimulate the potential of the human body through special means, and most people have no chance of obtaining true teachings. It was precisely because of a coincidence that Wei Tao helped a martial artist find an urgently needed herb in the mountains, and later his father made several pieces of furniture for him, finally building such a line. On the contrary, the offerings that were handed over to the medicine gang that month were directly returned by more than half, and the family had never been unjustly harassed in the mountains outside the city to chop firewood and collect medicine. From then on, Wei's father also changed his mind and no longer paid Wei Tao to study and learn from a private school teacher. Instead, he thought about letting him practice martial arts. According to Wei's simple thinking, the world is becoming increasingly chaotic nowadays. Even if our ancestors smoke and pass the imperial examination as a scholar, it may not be of great use. It is better to find a way to learn a martial arts skill. Even if we cannot become a martial arts master in the future, even if we can become the guardians of the noble families in the inner city, we can still have a relatively stable livelihood. Wei Mu fumbled under the bed and took out a jar, counting the copper coins and broken silver inside with her rough fingers. "Shopkeeper, it seems like we're still a little short," she said, "including my salary this month, it should be around." Wei Hong turned his head and watched his mother count the money. He took out a small cloth bag from his close-fitting clothes and poured a small amount of silver into it. The next morning, Wei Tao carefully guarded his money bag and arrived at the gate of a large courtyard near the inner city. Across the courtyard wall, there were occasional loud cries coming from inside. This is still his first time truly coming to the training ground, instead of just handing over herbs to the servants hired by Zhou Wushi outside as before. He knocked on the door and after a moment, a tall and sturdy man walked out. "I am the Xiao Wei who collects herbs. I came specifically to pay my respects to Master Zhou. Is it time to deliver the medicine again today? Just leave it to the front steward." "No, I'm here to learn boxing from Master Zhou." "Learn boxing? Come in." The big man squinted his eyes, looked at him up and down, then turned around and walked towards the inside. In the yard, more than 30 men and women of different heights are practicing hard. There was a huge iron pot among the few people, filled with iron sand and with a charcoal fire underneath. They were constantly thrusting their hands in and flipping, sweating profusely one by one, their arms tinged with blood like bright red color, and white steam faintly emitted. Passing through the martial arts training ground and entering the lobby of the inner courtyard, a middle-aged man with a black face and long beard sat back on the Grand Tutor's chair, squinting his eyes slightly and closing his eyes to rest. Upon hearing the footsteps, he slowly opened his eyes and his gaze fell on Wei Tao. Wei Tao quickly clasped his fists and saluted, "Master Zhou. Do you really want to learn boxing from me?" The middle-aged man frowned slightly. "Yes." Master Zhou picked up a few beards and slowly stroked them. "It's not impossible for me to accept you, but for the sake of you always delivering medicine to the martial arts school, I would like to remind you that with your physique and lack of qi and blood, if you insist on spending money to learn martial arts from me, it's better to save up this money and save it for taking the imperial examination." Wei Tao remained silent and bowed deeply again. "Okay, have you brought enough tea fees for apprenticeship?" Master Zhou waited for a moment and closed his eyes again. This is the tea money from disciple Xiaojing, teacher. Wei Tao presented the bag containing the money with both hands, while also offering a cup of clear tea. Master Zhou took a sip of the tea and said, since you have entered the door, even if you are a named disciple of our sect, you will practice with other named disciples in the future. As for whether you can become a formal disciple in the end and learn the true teachings of our sect's red thread fist, it depends on your performance and nature. At this point, he looked up and his gaze wandered around before finally landing on the strong man standing nearby. Xiao Wuzi, come and take him down to practice. Let's start with the most basic external training, he said. The sun is setting in the west. Apply a light layer of red to the entire Changyuan city. Wei Tao pulled his arms out of the large pot in front of him, and from his fingertips to his elbows, it turned bright red. The area where the skin was torn was also covered in dense powder residue, causing a burning pain. There are still many people like him in the martial arts training ground, with men and women practicing around a few large pots separately. There was almost no communication among the crowd, but they focused their attention on their own training, hoping to meet the entry-level standards and break away from the circle of named disciples, becoming formal disciples who could freely enter the inner courtyard. Not only can one truly come into contact with the secrets of Red Thread Fist, but their identity and status also differ greatly from those of a named disciple. At least in most areas of the outer city, disciples of the Red Thread Fist are a sign that can bring considerable security and benefits to themselves and even their families. Fifth Senior Brother. Hello, Senior Brother Wu. I have met Senior Brother Wu. Amidst a series of respectful greetings, the strong man who had seen him before walked over in the morning, holding a bottle of pale yellow medicine in his hand. Before we could even get closer, a strong pungent smell rushed towards us. Junior Brother Wei, go to the well and wash your arms. It's your first time practicing outside today, and the teacher asked me to teach you how to apply medicine. Thank you very much, Senior Brother Wu. Wei Tao took a deep breath, suppressed the burning pain, and watched as his hands and forearms gradually turned earthy. The numbness and itching of ants devouring his heart came one after another, making people want to scratch their skin hard. Don't move around, just hold on and it will pass. Senior Brother Wu rolled up his sleeves and said with a friendly expression, I was the same way back then. I couldn't help but scratch hard and tore off a large piece of skin, leaving a scar even now. After evenly applying the entire bottle of medicine, Senior Brother Wu let out a long breath of turbid air and said, let's go. Your first day of external training is very exhausting for your body. After meeting the teacher, hurry back and rest. Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan. Calm. A moment later, Wei Tao arrived at the inner hall and saw Master Zhou sitting there drinking tea non-stop. Come here. He opened his eyes and waved at Wei Tao. Extend your hand. Wei Tao raised his hands according to Yen, but suddenly a flower appeared in front of him. Before I could react, the left and right tiger mouths seemed to have been pricked. All the pain suddenly disappeared, and then there was a numbness, unable to even feel the presence of one's own arm. As time passed, Wei Tao suddenly felt a warm sensation again. Compared to the burning pain and sudden numbness just now, it was simply an experience from hell to heaven. He instinctively lowered his head and saw that the palms of his hands were bright red, looking like steamed prawns. Did you remember? In a daze, Master Zhou's voice rang in his ear. Wei Tao suddenly regained his senses, only then did he have a reaction. Within his hands, there was a faint surge of heat, and wherever he went, even the skin on that line turned even redder. Before he could answer, Master Zhou continued, it's normal not to remember. After I go down, I will gradually experience it. When I practice until my palms are as red as blood and touch them like jade, I will truly enter the door of my red thread fist. Alright, it's getting dark. You can just go back and remember to come over at dawn tomorrow. Thank you very much for your guidance, teacher. Wei Tao quickly bowed and said, that disciple will go back first. Wait a moment. Master Zhou picked up the teacup and took a sip. He opened his just closed eyes and called out to him, "The outer city has been a bit uneasy lately. It's your first day coming to study again, so let Xiao Wu take you back." Chapter 3. Mutual Aid. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Senior Brother Wu, just now the teacher tapped my tiger's mouth. First it was a burning pain, then I lost consciousness, and then there was a warm feeling. What's going on? On the way back, Wei Tao was still reminiscing about the wonderful feeling he had just had. This is the method of transporting qi and blood for our beginner's red thread fist. 5 senior brothers pondered and slowly said, once you can freely control the circulation of qi and blood, even if you truly enter the door, you can engage in deeper cultivation. Senior brother, how long does it usually take to meet the entry-level requirements? This doesn't necessarily mean it's fast. It's like being the most talented senior brother. It's said that after being guided by the teacher, one can easily activate qi and blood in just one night. Also, the second senior sister only took a few days to get started and succeed. There are also slow ones. Before you, there were many named disciples who worked hard for several months but couldn't meet the entry-level requirements. In the end, you had to leave the martial arts school on your own and find another path. Wei Tao asked again, "Senior brother, how long will it take to meet the entry requirements and have to leave the martial arts school? How long is the longest?" Senior brother Wu was somewhat uncertain and said, "Generally, it doesn't take more than half a year. In fact, even if you work hard for 5 months to meet the entry-level requirements, it's unlikely that you will be accepted as an official disciple by the teacher. After all, it takes several months just to get started, and it's basically impossible to develop any great skills in the future." The 5th senior brother's name is Pengyu. Last year, he stood out from a group of named disciples and became one of the official disciples of Master Zhou who personally passed on martial arts. After an afternoon of contact, Wei Tao found that he seemed to have a quite simple and honest personality, only giving people a cold and indifferent feeling because he was a bit dull and didn't like to talk. The two of them chatted leisurely all the way, but didn't feel bored. Soon, they crossed most of the outer city and arrived near Wei Tao's residence. Not long after entering a small alley, Wei Tao suddenly stopped in his footsteps and then continued walking forward as if nothing had happened. Pengyu frowned slightly and said, "Junior brother Wei, did you know those 2 people just now? I'm not afraid of being laughed at by senior brother Wu. I was just robbed of money by them yesterday." Before Wei Tao could finish a sentence, he felt a sudden tremor on the ground and a strong wind howling past him. A large canopy of dust was stirred up. When he regained his senses, the 5th senior brother Pengyu had already stood at a nearby corner and waved to him. At his feet lay 2 men, one tall and one short, who had snatched 2 copper coins from him in the rain yesterday afternoon. "Junior brother Wei, what are you going to do with them?" As the 5th senior brother Pengyu spoke, he searched around the 2 of them and found all the silver coins. "We are the people of Uncle Suo Chi, you." Click. The tall man who was speaking suddenly let out a scream and looked down at his abnormally twisted right leg, with a layer of sweat on his forehead in an instant. The short man's face turned pale and he said, "Please spare your life, Grandpa, if you spare me." Click. Another crisp sound. The right leg of the short man received the same treatment. Senior brother Wu stood up straight and spat on the ground, "The person who still seeks Uncle Chi, I believe in your ghost and won't take a bath to take care of it. You deserve Uncle Chi's attention." When he looked up, he had already changed into a gentle and honest smiling face. "Junior brother Wei, this is their money bag that they snatched from you, right?" Wei Tao instinctively took the heavy money bag, thought for a moment, and then poured out all the silver inside, dividing it into half and stuffing it into Pengyu's hand. "Thank you, senior brother. If it weren't for senior brother following me today, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been blackmailed by them. Oh, yesterday they said they were from the Hidden Sword Society. Peng Yu lowered his head to look at the broken silver and copper coins in his hand, and his smile suddenly became more innocent, even with a hint of shyness. Junior brother Wei, now that we are already fellow disciples, we naturally need to work together, watch and help each other. Click. Wei Tao's pupils suddenly shrank, and a cold breath rushed straight from his back to his forehead. He held his breath and saw Peng Yu slowly retracting his feet. The two of them, who were groaning in pain on the ground, tilted their heads to one side and had lost their breath. Junior brother Wei, I'm worried that they might be the street boys from a gang that doesn't have long eyes, and they might cause trouble for your family again in the future. Peng Yu scratched his head and seemed to be hesitant in his words, so when dealing with this kind of person, either don't do it, and eliminate the root cause, leaving no future troubles. Wei Tao listened silently, then looked up at the smiling fifth senior brother. Apart from the surprise brought by the contrast of simplicity and ruthlessness, his heart was more filled with the shock of seeing death for the first time. Originally, in this increasingly chaotic world, human life is really so worthless. If he had not apprenticed, perhaps in the near future, he would have died silently in a dark corner. Even further thinking, if it weren't for Peng Yu bringing him back tonight, it's still unknown whether he could see the sun tomorrow. Only powerful forces, in various meanings, can enable people to live safely and freely. These two guys who once robbed him, just because they were weaker than the fifth senior brother, just died on the spot, and no one cared who they were and what their past and experiences were. 15 minutes later, Peng Yu watched as he walked into the house and suddenly waved his hand again, saying, "Junior brother Wei, your place of residence is also too far away. I think it's best for you to move to a martial arts school. The teacher said that the outer city has been a bit unstable lately, and walking at night like this in the future will also increase the chances of encountering danger, won't it? However, if you live in a martial arts school, you also need to pay an additional 2 taels of silver per month for accommodation and meals. Junior brother, you need to prepare in advance." Wei Tao touched the wallet he had just received and nodded thoughtfully. "The sky is dawn." Wei Tao thrust his hands heavily into the iron sand in front of him, and when he pulled it out, it brought a cloud of smoke and dust. The faint herbal scent seeps into your nostrils, and this is a medicinal powder mixed in iron sand. Combined with the daily application of the medicine, it can be more fully absorbed by the human body. This is already his 30th day at the Red Line Boxing Club. Stir-fry medicinal sand, boil for strength, apply medicine, and sense qi and blood. Repeating incredibly boring exercises every day. Perhaps because he was able to ensure food every day and used his qi and blood to cook his body, he leapt up a lot compared to when he first became a disciple, and his muscles also took shape, no longer the thin and short appearance he had before. During this period, the martial arts school quietly lost a few familiar faces and introduced a few new ones, engaging in what Wei Tao called frosting, external training with others. Although he has not yet met the requirements for beginners in Red Line Fist, after a period of training, Wei Tao feels that he has benefited greatly. At least the body is much stronger than at the beginning, especially the hands. With the joint action of continuous sanding and medicine, they have formed a thick cocoon that can easily break a green brick. In addition, physical changes are also closely related to the meals provided by the martial arts school at noon. The taste of stewed vegetables in a big pot is not very good, but it is much better than what I used to eat at home. Especially here, meat is often eaten, and large chunks of fat provide sufficient nutrition for Wei Tao, who is currently in the developmental stage. After half a morning of frosting, Wei Tao cleaned his arms by the well and then went to the nearby stone lock to start today's strength training. A month has passed, and he still hasn't reached the entry-level standard of Red Line Fist. Although there is still a long time before the deadline set by the martial arts school, this situation where no actual progress has been made despite efforts still feels a lot of pressure. Chapter 4. Traveling Stones. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You're not good at practicing like this. It's easy to pull yourself apart, and you're going the wrong way. Suddenly, A voice with a faint smile sounded from behind. Wei Tao put down the stone lock and saw a tall young man in a blue shirt standing under the shade of a tree, looking at him with both hands on his back. "May I ask who you're looking for?" He clasped his fists and bowed slightly. "Are you the new disciple the teacher has recruited?" The young man in the blue shirt nodded as if without hesitation, reaching out to pick up a larger and heavier stone lock. The stone lock is not only used to exercise arm strength, but also for grip strength, wrist strength, waist strength, and leg strength, as well as techniques for step movement and avoidance reactions. Even the changes in qi and blood circulation can be carefully grasped and observed through it. This is the Yu Shi Quan that I learned while traveling. It is specifically designed to be practiced in conjunction with the Shi lock technique. Although it may not have much potential for power, it has significant benefits for practicing the red thread fist technique. You should take it seriously. As he spoke, he gently threw it upwards. The Yu Shi fist is divided into snatch and swing lifts. There are also throwing methods such as forward throw, reverse throw, cross throw, and back throw, palm joint, finger joint, arm joint, elbow joint, shoulder joint and other joint methods. The most important thing is to sense the force it brings to you and make the body make the most appropriate response in an instant, so as to more finely control the changes in qi and blood when exerting force. The stone lock dances up and down around its body, howling and creating a wind, yet giving people a sense of beauty that combines rigidity and softness, and is smooth and flawless. After a moment, the young man in the blue shirt shook the stone lock and landed it steadily on the ground. His voice did not fluctuate at all. This martial arts technique takes the meaning of a wandering stone rotating and rolling in the water flow. If you treat the water flow as your surging qi and blood, do you understand? Thank you very much for your guidance, senior brother. Wei Tao regained his senses and bowed again. After getting up, he realized that there was already a circle of people around him, and at the same time, he bowed to the young man in the blue shirt, saying, "I have seen senior brother before. Thank you very much for your guidance. Turns out this is senior brother Tan Pan. It's the first time I've seen him appear in a martial arts school since I started my apprenticeship. Xiao Pan has returned. How is the situation outside?" Master Zhou's voice came, and he, who had hardly ever left the inner courtyard, also arrived at the martial arts training ground. Tan Pan's face became serious and he said, "I happen to have a few things to report to the teacher." "Well, then come in and talk about it." Master Zhou coughed lightly and his gaze wandered around, then fell on a tall and prominent man who was most easily noticed. "Peng Yu, take someone to the street to buy some wine and vegetables, and come back at noon to clean up the dust for your senior brother." Peng Yu nodded and, amidst the expectant gaze of the group of named disciples, reached out and pointed in a certain direction. "Junior brother Wei, please accompany me on a trip." The two of them took money from the martial arts school manager and quickly arrived at the restaurant where Master Zhou was used to eating. After ordering a table of noodles, they sat by the window on the second floor and waited slowly. On the side of the restaurant, there is a large area of Qingshi Square. On the 1st and 15th days of the Lunar New Year, gatherings are spontaneously formed here, with various small vendors setting up stalls covering the entire square and even extending along the long street for a long distance. However, today is not the time to rush to the market. The Qingshi Square is also crowded with people, and its scale is even larger than during the gathering. This abnormal situation immediately caught the attention of both of them. Gods and Buddhas are born, and Ming kings are born. Golden light surges on the ground and red lights illuminate the sky. Pu Hua is a pure and trustworthy person at home, and those who obtain Fu Shui can dispel diseases and evil spirits. Vaguely, the sounds of various praises and songs were like silk and bamboo entering the ears, passing through the open space in the center of the square. Wei Tao squinted his eyes to observe carefully, and then saw an old Taoist with a child's face and white hair. With the cooperation of several young men and girls in white clothes, he distributed paper symbols to the crowd of onlookers, which then attracted waves of prayers and cheers. What kind of person is this? Gathering a group in broad daylight and creating such a grand scene. Aren't you afraid that the city lord will send troops to suppress it directly? Peng Yu frowned and drank the coarse tea in one gulp. At this moment, the shopkeeper of the restaurant walked over with 2 large food boxes and said, Master Peng is not aware of this. This old immortal is said to be the guardian fairy of the Red Lantern Society. He traveled here and specially set up an altar to pray for blessings for the people of this city. Praying for blessings, does this old gentleman really have extraordinary divine communication skills? Wei Tao withdrew his gaze and took a sip of tea. Well, we dare not speak recklessly about this, the restaurant owner lowered his voice. But just this morning, the white-clothed Taoist in front of many people, used talisman water to cure a bleeding patient on the spot, so many people rushed over to seek talismans. Peng Yu asked, do the shopkeeper know who the patient coughing up blood is and where they live? I don't know about that anymore. I just glanced at it from a distance and the store couldn't do without people. Peng Yu nodded, picked up Wei Tao and left without saying a word more. Return to the Red Line Martial Arts School. Wei Tao carried a food box and entered the inner courtyard with Peng Yu. At this moment, he finally understood why so many named disciples were so excited about this errand. Because he was kept after entering the inner courtyard. Although he was just helping to pour wine and prepare dishes on the side, just listening to Master Zhou's conversation with a few formal disciples had already brought him a lot of benefits. Not to mention in his drunken state, senior brother Tan Pan called him forward again and specifically guided him on the key points of practicing Yusher Fist and transporting Qi and blood. Many unclear areas suddenly became clear. After dinner, Wei Tao returned to the martial arts arena and continued his morning training. He carefully recalled the key points of practicing the stone lock mentioned by his senior brother Tan Pan, and then chose the smallest one to hold in his hand. Palm, back of hand, fingertips, forearms, repeated contact and falling, countless failures can bring true success. Compared to the inability to directly perceive and grasp the movement of qi and blood, the practice of Yusher Fist is actually much simpler, requiring a long period of practice and adjustment to proficiently complete a complete set of movements. It wasn't until the sunset that he basically mastered several coherent movements of exerting force. But there is still a considerable way to go before mastering it proficiently and even connecting it with the beginner's method of transporting qi and blood in Red Thread Fist. Ha! Wei Tao let out a long, turbid breath and went to the well to fetch some water. He briefly wiped his body with a damp towel. Just as he was getting dressed and preparing to leave, he suddenly froze there. Zhaozuiyuan.com. The golden symbol quietly appeared before my eyes, and in addition to the 7 accumulated gold coins, another column of information mysteriously appeared below. On the left are 2 lines of small characters. Name. Yusher Fist. Status. Beginner to learn and first to practice. There is also a light blue progress bar on the right side. The progress displayed so far has only just begun, and it is even less than 10%. Staring at the status bar in front of him for a while, Wei Tao's heart suddenly moved and he grabbed a fleeting spiritual light. If it weren't inside the martial arts school, he would almost scream out loud. If he had only seen gold symbols and coins before without much reaction, now that he sees the status bar, he immediately remembers what this is. Isn't it a casual martial arts game designed by him before crossing time, with a placement-based turn system? As long as you open and leave it on your phone, a game coin will be added to the user every period of time, which can be used to improve the character's ability and cultivation level, gradually transforming from a small sapling to a towering tree. In the game interface, clicking on the character ID will bring up the status bar, where you can see the cultivation progress bar for each selected skill obtained. This is the most familiar place for Wei Tao, and it is also the main reason that reminds him of this game. He put down the basin towel in his hand and sat down on the bench next to the well. My mind was completely immersed in the status bar in front of me. Then I was surprised to find that a line of handwriting really appeared in the status bar. Whether to consume 1 gold coin to increase the cultivation level of Yusher Fist. Surprisingly, it's true. Wei Tao concentrated his mind and directly tried to forcefully click on the yes option. Chapter 5. Realm. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The complex golden symbol suddenly flickered. A gold coin disappeared without a trace. Wei Tao hasn't realized what's going on yet. Shua. A mysterious aura dissipated. His eyes suddenly turned black. The headache was splitting, as if someone had pried it open with a chisel and stuffed something inside. When Wei Tao regained his senses, he found that a gold coin had disappeared. Looking at the status bar of Yusher Fist again, it has increased from less than 10% to 20% directly. At this point, looking at the status bar again, the description of Yusher Fist has also changed. Name: Yusher Fist. Progress: 20%. Status: beginner to learn and first to practice. The consumption of 1 gold coin resulted in a progress bar increase of at least 10%. So, how could Professor Tan Pan's Yusher Fist, the senior brother, still be improved like this? But why hasn't the status bar marked in redline fist? Is it because I haven't started yet? Wei Tao took a deep breath and slowly exhaled, suddenly remembering what Tan Pan had said. Practicing Yusher Fist to the depths would be of great benefit to Hongxian Fist. So after calming his mood, he spent another gold coin and increased the progress bar of Yusher Fist to 30%. My eyes turned black again, and this time, besides a headache, even my body felt bloating and pain. It seems that consciousness and physical body are undergoing the lowest level of transformation simultaneously. Immediately after, Wei Tao consumed 3 more coins and devoted all his energy to the Yusher Fist. The progress bar skyrocketed from 30% to 60% in an instant. The status description on the progress bar goes from gradually improving to slightly achieving, and then directly turns into entering the room. Boom! The drastic changes once again erupted simultaneously in both consciousness and body. When everything calmed down, Wei Tao instinctively lowered his head and looked at his own hands. I was surprised to find that it was only a few short breaths, and my knuckles, palms, forearms, and shoulders and elbows were all thicker than before. My muscles were well defined and filled with a strong feeling. What surprised him even more was that he also had a lot of experience practicing Yusher Fist in his mind, as if he had really spent an unknown amount of time practicing and adapting day and night. The 5 gold coins accumulated since his time traveling were suddenly used up, which made Wei Tao resist the idea of consuming more gold coins and quickly walked to the corner where the stone lock was placed. The sky gradually darkened. In the darkness, a stone lock flipped up and down, dancing with agility. From a visual perspective, it was no different from Tan Pan's demonstration, perhaps even slightly better. More importantly, his perception of qi and blood has been completely new in every encounter and collision, making him involuntarily immersed and even forgetting the passage of time. The faint footsteps came from a distance, and Wei Tao withdrew the stone lock and turned to look to one side. After a moment, senior brother Pengyu slowly walked over. He still carried a slight smell of alcohol, and his eyes in the darkness were burning and shining. Junior brother Wei hasn't returned yet. I want to practice more while the weather is cool. Pengyu casually found a place to sit down, closed his eyes, and slowly said, "Senior brother is the most valued successor of the teacher. His skills have already reached a level that is only 1 line inferior to the teacher's, and you are lucky to receive his personal guidance." Wei Tao also sat down next to him and said, "Senior Peng, what are the boundaries of our red thread fist? After all these days, I still have no idea at all. You haven't even achieved the beginner's qi and blood circulation yet. It's too early to think about this now. Only when you meet the teacher's requirements and can gather qi and blood in your palm, can you truly enter the door and further access the teacher's true teachings." Peng Yu laughed heartily, but continued to introduce himself. Our red thread fist has 4 levels, namely forging skin, refining tendons, coagulation, and red thread. Forged skin is the most basic level. When can one reach a state of mind, with skin color as blood and hardness as stone? Even if the training is complete, it can further stimulate qi and blood to exercise the fascia, only when the fascia swells and retracts at will, and it is difficult for ordinary knives and guns to penetrate, can one attempt to step into a higher level of coagulation. What about the red line realm above the coagulation? Wei Tao asked after him. I'm still in the process of refining my muscles, so you need to go ask the teacher directly and see if he can answer you. That's okay, I'll just enter the door first. Wei Tao shook his head and picked up the stone lock on the ground again, starting the simplest throwing and catching practice. Suddenly, another month passed. Approaching noon. Today, the 6th senior brother who was on duty guiding the training came out of the inner courtyard, called out a few people's names, and led them into the inner courtyard. Wei Tao looked around, only to find that the group of named disciples around him had no expression of envy. Most of them were helpless and anxious, while a small part had a strange expression of schadenfreude. Not long after, a few people came out of the inner courtyard, tidied up their things briefly, and quietly left the martial arts school. Only one of them came to the training ground with a package on his back and gave a fist to the registered disciple who was still practicing hard. The green mountains remain unchanged and the green water flows forever. If you brothers and sisters have anything to do in the future, you can find me near the South City. He didn't receive much response. A group of named disciples who were still working hard to polish the iron sand, only a few of them clasped their fists and saluted, while the rest only nodded and ignored them completely. They didn't want to pull their hands out of the iron sand, wasting this set of exercises on their perception of qi and blood circulation. The person remained silent for a moment, and their smile stiffened. They turned around and lowered their heads to leave, leaving only a growing shadow that eventually disappeared into the martial arts training ground. What are you all doing in a daze? If you don't practice well and want to endure a few months' worth of work here like them, but can only go back and continue to struggle. Don't think my words sound unpleasant. None of you are geniuses, let alone lazy. If you want to live a better life, you must put in a lot of effort. Whoever thinks what I said is wrong can pack up and get out now. Senior brother Lu scolded loudly and went to the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, leaving behind the medicine he needed today. He turned his head and went straight back to the inner courtyard. Senior brother Wei, how long have you been in? At lunchtime, a 15 or 16-year-old boy, who looked as graceful as a woman, sat next to Wei Tao with his rice bowl in hand. The young man's name is Wang Lianshan, and he is a newcomer who just joined the martial arts school not long ago. He looks quite outgoing and can get along with anyone to chat. As soon as he arrived at the martial arts school, he had already established relationships with many named disciples. Especially for some disciples who have stayed in the martial arts school for nearly 3 months, they have formed a sizable group centered around him. Wei Tao looked up at Wang Lianshan, tore up a piece of mantu, soaked it in broth, and stirred it with chopsticks. It's been more than 2 months. Wang Lianshan smiled inexplicably and said, then you must hurry up. Before I came, I heard someone say that the teacher accepts disciples of all kinds. As long as he can get in his eye and afford the apprenticeship fee, he can become a named disciple, but if you want to be admitted to the inner courtyard and receive a true transmission, it is best to meet the entry-level requirements for qi and blood circulation within 3 months, otherwise it will be difficult. 3 months. Wei Tao frowned slightly. I heard it was 6 months before. Even if it wasn't 6 months, 4 or 5 months would be about the same. Wang Lianshan pursed his lips and said calmly, half a year is impossible. As for the 4 or 5 months you mentioned, maybe it was possible before, but now there are more and more people who want to join the martial arts school. It should be after 3 months, they will kick you out and basically won't let you stay longer. Even if someone takes 4 or 5 months to find it difficult to get started, their subsequent cultivation is basically without any progress. Senior brother Wei, use your brain to think about it. Why has the teacher been rooted in the outer city for so many years, and only a few formal disciples in the inner courtyard? Chapter 6. Birth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wei Tao frowned slightly and said, "What junior brother Wang means is that even when the disciples in the inner courtyard have reached a point where they cannot improve their cultivation, they must also become disciples and seek their own livelihood." That's right, that's the truth. Wang Lianshan chuckled again as he spoke. However, their choice of going out is much wider. For example, the renowned seven uncle Suo from Changle Fong in the outer city has two formal disciples who were previously taught by his teachers, which can be considered as the backbone of his left and right arms. Of course, senior brother doesn't have to worry either. After being cleared out of the martial arts school, you can come to my family's guild. Although their status and treatment are not comparable to those two senior brothers in the inner courtyard, they can guarantee that you will not have to worry about food and drink no matter what, and every time I execute a mission in the gang, I still have to spend a lot of money to get it, just like this group of eliminated named disciples. The better part has been invited into the gang. At this point, he took out a silver ingot from his pocket and placed it on the table in front of him. As long as senior brother Wei is willing, you can take these 5 taels of settling silver now. From now on, everyone will be good brothers of the Silver Wolf Gang. Wei Tao lowered his eyes, moved a little farther, and broke off another mantu. Younger martial brother Wang, please ask others first. I have no idea of joining a guild at present. Wang Lianshan's smile remained unchanged. Senior brother, you can join the guild if you don't want to. Have you seen the little girl who entered the martial arts school with me? Her grandfather is the head of the Iron Alley in the north of the city. As long as you can make her interested, you can choose to eat and drink spicy food from now on. Just this little girl has a high self-esteem, I'm afraid you won't even get in her eyes. Wei Tao glanced at the female disciple who was surrounded by a group of people not far away and shook his head slowly. Now I just want to focus on practicing martial arts. Let's talk about other things later. Senior brother Wei should know that practicing martial arts requires talent. Moreover, most of the time, making the right choice is more important than blindly striving, and when there is an opportunity, we must seize it tightly. Senior brother, who grew up in this terrible quagmire in the outer city, should understand this truth better than me. Wang Lianshan lightly clapped his hands and made a crisp sound like the sound of gold and iron colliding. However, upon closer inspection, there is still a slight dissonant noise. Sensing Wei Tao's sideways gaze, Wang Lianshan slowly spread out his hands. The palm is bright red like blood, and the touch is as hard as a stone. After a moment, he dissipated the qi and blood from his palm and showed a faint smile. Senior brother Wei, I suddenly felt a sensation when I absorbed the medicine this morning. If I continue to use the qi and blood, I will no longer have the initial stagnation and difficulty. However, we are still a little short of the teacher's entry-level requirements, and it will eventually take some time to stabilize. In the evening, I will host and invite a few brothers who are preparing to join the guild to dinner. Senior brother Wei, think carefully, and it's best to come and participate. After all, a month may not be short, but it is not very long either. Don't regret not seizing the opportunity one gave you. After a while, having learned boxing, one can consider joining a certain guild. But if you can't succeed in learning, what is the purpose of joining a gang that is unpredictable? It's better to go back and inherit the family business and become a little carpenter who collects medicine and chops firewood. Several thoughts flashed through Wei Tao's heart, and just as he was about to politely refuse, a loud noise suddenly came from the door. Looking up, I saw senior brother Peng Yu strode towards me from outside, without even looking around at the named disciples who stood up to greet me. I spoke up and said, "Junior brother Wei, I have something to talk to you about." Wei Tao stood up and exclaimed in surprise, "Senior brother Peng, is there anything that the teacher is looking for me for?" He subconsciously calculated the time. It can be confirmed that there is absolutely no more than 3 months of deadline from the beginning to the present. Peng Yu casually picked up a bun from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. While eating, he casually said, "The old steward of the martial arts school is going back to his hometown. The teacher said that junior brother Wei has read books and can also calculate accounts. It seems that he is preparing for you to take over the task of managing." Upon hearing this news, Wang Lianshan's face suddenly turned a bit ugly. After finishing his last sip of meat soup, Wei Tao placed the dishes on the table with a slightly apologetic smile on his face. "Look at junior brother Wang, it's really a bit unlucky. If I have time later, I'll be the host and invite junior brother Wang alone." Before he could finish speaking, Wang Lianshan let out a cold snort and stood up straight away, without even paying attention to Peng Yu standing beside him. At night, in a private room of a restaurant in the outer city, a group of people gathered at the table, pushing cups and changing cups, creating a lively atmosphere. "Come on, everyone, give a toast to junior brother Wang again." A few wine glasses collided in mid-air and were immediately consumed. Wang Lianshan picked up a chopstick of braised meat and put it into his mouth, exhaling a satisfied breath of wine. "Don't worry, senior brothers. After joining our Silver Wolf gang, everyone will earn money together and eat meat together. Naturally, we won't treat everyone unfairly. Thank you for cultivating, young leader." With Wang Xiao's words, we can rest assured. We are all people who lack talent and cannot become formal disciples. Thanks to being taken in by junior brother Wang, we don't know what kind of livelihood we need to find in the future to fill our stomachs. Don't worry, young leader. In the future, wherever you point, we will fight without any hesitation. Yes, this is called Brothers Unite, their benefits cut off gold. That kid surnamed Wei doesn't even give face to the young leader. I want to see if in another month, he won't become an official disciple of the inner courtyard. Even if he becomes the steward of the martial arts school, he still wants to lower the young leader's head. Wang Lianshan played with the wine glass in his hand and said with a half-smile, "Forget it. I have a good relationship with senior brother Peng in the inner courtyard and don't want to talk to us named disciples. But I never thought why the teacher made him become the steward of the martial arts school. Now that the outer city is becoming increasingly chaotic, it depends on whether he can sustain it." The room diagonally opposite the private room. Peng Yu tore at the smoked chicken on the plate, eating it with a mouth full of oil, even his eyebrows and eyes stretched open. After eating most of the smoked chicken in one breath, he finally emptied his hand and took up the large wine bowl to drink it all in one gulp. "Junior brother Wei, I suspect you intentionally chose this restaurant and happened to sit across from them." Wei Tao helped to refill the drink and smiled silently. "Isn't it that senior brother Peng said he wanted to eat smoked chicken?" Senior brother thought to himself that the smoked chicken from Xiaobai building tasted the best, so he asked senior brother Peng to book this elegant room. Who knew he happened to meet them? Peng Yu chuckled and changed his tone. "Do you want senior brother to take you over and have a drink with them?" "Forget it, it's better not to see each other when we meet, it's making everyone look bad." The two of them clinked another glass, and Wei Tao lowered his eyes, covering the flickering light in his eyes. "I just didn't hear what they said," he said. "After all, junior brother Wang is a lively and outgoing young man, and he is not a bad person. It's not worth considering that these things have hurt the harmony between the senior brothers." Peng Yu smiled foolishly again and said, "What junior brother Wei said is reasonable. Anyway, when named disciples come and go, the teacher doesn't even remember their names. Ultimately, we need to work hard to cultivate and become formal disciples. We need to teach the teacher the true teachings." During the conversation, Peng Yu had already finished eating the dishes on the table. He pushed the table and stood up. "The taste is good, I'll go pay the bill. I treat Senior Peng to chicken, but there's no point in asking him to pay the bill. Go to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Wei Tao said as he took out a jar of roasted wine and 2 packaged smoked chickens from under the table. "Take these back to Senior Peng for supper," he said. "I'm so sorry about that. Senior brother takes care of me a lot on weekdays, so I should be embarrassed." Okay, thank you very much for entertaining Junior Brother Wei today. I had a great time enjoying my appetite. Peng Yu patted his stomach, grabbed the packaged wine and meat in his hand, and went straight out and down the stairs. Standing on the already dark long street, he looked up at the noisy private room upstairs and said, "You are not yet a formal disciple of the family, perhaps you don't know that Wang Lianshan has an adopted sister." Before Wei Tao could respond, Peng Yu continued speaking. "She is the second senior sister Wang Yingxue, the strongest member of our sect besides the teacher and senior brother. Previously, the old steward resigned. It seems that senior sister Wang recommended someone to be the steward of the martial arts school. The teacher was already moved, but for some reason, he suddenly remembered junior brother Wei and asked me to call you over for questioning. In addition, besides my senior brother and I, who come from a humble background, third senior brother runs an escort agency at home. Senior brother Suo Yunhai is the nephew of Suo Qi, the owner of the gambling house in the outer city. 6 junior brothers' families have basically monopolized the leather business in several towns outside the city. Do you understand?" Wei Tao nodded thoughtfully and said, "I understand. Thank you, senior brother, for informing me. I understand, but it's not really useful. When you work hard to climb up, you realize that someone was born here, but if you don't climb, you'll have to be trampled into the mud, desperately searching for a living to grab a bit of leftover food." Peng Yu waved his hand and walked leisurely along the long street, quickly disappearing into the darkness that the lights couldn't reflect. Chapter 7. Bloody. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. After another day of hard practice, Wei Tao walked briskly on the long street under the silver moonlight. A series of named disciples left in a gloomy manner before my eyes. They have been practicing hard in the martial arts school for over 3 months, but they have never been able to meet the entry-level requirements of Red Line Fist, and can only reluctantly give up on finding another way of life. However, in this world, it is not easy to have a stable livelihood. In the end, either they become the bottom of the struggle for survival, or they join a gang and live a life of licking blood on the edge of the knife, disappearing silently without knowing when. Although he was not familiar with those named disciples and didn't say a few words from beginning to end, the increasing number of people leaving still brought considerable pressure to Wei Tao. If you don't meet the entry-level requirements, you won't be able to become a formal disciple. Even if you become a formal disciple, if you can't progress step by step, you can only go out and become a caretaker or a gang thug. I have at most half a month left, and I will have reached the deadline of 3 months. Although I have taken over the management of the martial arts school now, in this increasingly chaotic world, I don't have enough strength to be close to me, and ultimately it's all in vain. He sighed inwardly and looked down at the palms of his hands. After more than 2 months of polishing, combined with the stonelock training bonus that reached the level of entering the room, he was only 1 line away from reaching the entry-level standard. However, it was this line of difference, which seemed like he could cross it with just a slight lift of his foot, but it was like a gap that no matter how hard he tried, he could not cross. The shops on both sides of the long street have long been closed, with only the restaurants and casinos still lit up. Various noisy sounds spread far away under the night sky. If the entire Tsangyuan city is divided into several areas, the inner city is undoubtedly a gathering place for the wealthy and powerful, and ordinary people rarely have the opportunity to enter it. Even in the outer city, different social classes have emerged. Near the inner city, it is relatively prosperous and safe, equivalent to a high-end community with a dense middle class, while the further outward it becomes, the more dilapidated and chaotic it becomes, until it enters the slums of the bottom mud. The location of the Red Line Martial Arts School is a mansion near the inner city, where various guilds have converged and even the official army conducts night patrols. Compared to the edge area where Wei Tao lives, it is undoubtedly much safer and more orderly. After all, those who can live on the outskirts of the inner city either have certain strength or have intricate connections with the inner city. Perhaps the shopkeeper of an ordinary pawn shop on the roadside could be the white glove of a nobleman in the inner city, and once provoked, he would face thunderous oppression and blow. A few days ago, while eating at the martial arts school, he heard that the leader of the Wu gang's feces had angered a shop owner near the inner city due to his lack of vision. He was then chased to the mountains and killed by indiscriminate knives, and to this day, his body has not been found. A gust of night breeze swept by, and Wei Tao restrained his thoughts and quietly clenched the short knife hidden in his sleeve, becoming even more cautious and cautious. Moving forward, you will enter the chaotic and disorderly slums, and under the cover of night, there are unpredictable dangers lurking everywhere. As the saying goes, when the moon is dark and the wind is high, it kills people. When it is cloudy and rainy, it kills people. Passing by the dark alley near the noisy casino, Wei Tao faintly heard the sound of sharp blades piercing into his flesh. There is also a faint smell of blood floating in the wind. Dare to pick and hang some money in Uncle Chi's field, it's quite daring. What you touched was still Huang Gongzi's silver money. Even if the heavenly King Laozi came, he couldn't save you. Hurry up, Huang Gongzi just spoke up. Let's hurry up and take the person back to take a look. Who is the one who doesn't have long eyes and dares to break ground on his head? Wei Tao turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to this, only accelerating the pace of his journey. Due to the reason of senior brother Suo in the inner courtyard of the martial arts school, he has also heard of the name of seventh uncle and many stories about him. The most famous one is forcing 4 leaders of the Hidden Sword Society to retreat, and he also drew with the deputy sword master who arrived, laying a solid foundation for his position in the outer city. But for Huang Gongzi, all he knows is that he is a young master of the Huang family in the inner city. He likes to hang out in the brothels and gambling stalls in the outer city, spending a lot of money without even frowning. The people who make a living with the outer city simply live in 2 different worlds. Suddenly, the sound of clothes flickering, swords colliding, and low moans mixed together, coming from the alley behind me at the same time. Suddenly there was a fight. It seems that the accomplice who picked and hung some money has arrived. The thugs who watched the scene have suffered losses, and perhaps even died. It's very dangerous here. If you're not careful, you'll get caught up in it. You must stay away immediately. A few thoughts flashed in Wei Tao's heart, and he immediately ran along the long street for a distance, then plunged into the pitch-black alley by the roadside, running towards home without any pause. Click. He stepped on a dead branch and stopped in front of a randomly built shack. The intermittent and heavy breathing, as well as the faint smell of blood, all reminded him that something was wrong here. Although passing through this alley and taking another turn forward would take him back home, Wei Tao did not hesitate and jumped over the wall into a dilapidated courtyard. After a moment, the dense footsteps echoed from far to near, quickly approaching the location of the shack. There was also the whining of a hunting dog mixed in the middle. There's a bloody smell, people should be hiding here. Be careful, the idea will prick your hands. Huang Gongzi said, who can catch this slut and go back, reward 10 taels of silver. Wei Tao hid in the haystack by the wall, covering his mouth and nose without moving, listening to the outside noise. Accompanied by the sound of Tsang Lang Lang drawing his sword, there was also a faint sound of silk and bamboo singing quietly coming from under the dark night. On both sides of the alley, one figure after another dressed in white surrounded the thugs belonging to Uncle Chi in the middle. Gods and Buddhas are born, and Ming kings are born. The Virgin descended and the golden light surged. Those who obtain talisman water can dispel diseases and evil spirits. There is one family in the world, sharing a peaceful world. Everywhere is uneven, everyone is warm. Enjoy the ultimate joy forever, and let all the people turn around together. The sound of singing is intertwined and lingering, capturing the soul. Hearing it makes one involuntarily intoxicated, without knowing what year it is tonight. Wei Tao furrowed his brows and worked hard to maintain the clarity of his consciousness. Just in the depths of my heart, it has already stirred up waves. The first 3 lines of the hymn he heard during the day can be classified as ordinary worship and preaching, which is also normal in the chaotic world today. However, the last 3 sentences I just heard are different, and can definitely be called undisguised slogans of rebellion. Whether in times of prosperity or chaos, seeking the book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com means that as long as imperial power still exists, it is a situation that will be brutally suppressed once discovered. So, things are getting bigger now. From stealing money and engaging in martial arts battles, I quickly moved on to secret societies and plotting rebellion. Pretend to be mischievous. Kill them, then go back and report to Uncle Seven and young Master Huang, and extinguish this divine and nagging red light society. The thug leader let out a low shout and led the way with a knife. Both sides collided fiercely, and in an instant, a bloody and brutal battle began. A figure flew high and crashed into one side of the wall, causing a large amount of soil and rock to fall down and hit the haystack, leaving the surrounding area in a mess. The fierce battle lasted only a few breaths before it came to an end, with only the movement of dragging corpses and cleaning up remaining. Wei Tao huddled in the haystack and dared not move a little, even as the final steps gradually faded away, there was no sound. Unconsciously, half a quarter of an hour passed before a woman outside the walls suddenly said, "These people should have no other backup. Just carefully inspect the surroundings and you can retreat." "Xiangzhu, what should this couple do?" a man asked. "Take the people back and make sure to figure out if their appearance has anything to do with our secret gathering tonight." "I understand." Puff. A figure jumped into the yard. Wei Tao held his breath and clenched his short knife. Fortunately, the person did not carefully inspect the grass pile covered by a pile of soil and stones, let alone know that there was still a living person hidden inside. Another period of time passed, and Wei Tao slowly emerged from the haystack, looking left and right without anyone, quickly disappearing into the deep darkness of the night. Chapter 8. Introduction. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a soft squeak, Wei Tao looked around and gently pushed open the wooden door of his own courtyard. The room was pitch black, and then the oil lamp lit up. A person carried it to the front door of the main house. "It's Brother Tao who has returned, and the food is still on the stove for you to keep." Wei Rongxing put down the wooden stick that inserted the door and opened the door. "Where's the mother?" Wei Tao entered the room and took a sip from the water bowl on the table. "Today, I went to the jade workshop with your sister to work. This way, our family can earn an extra 2 or 3 coins of silver every month, and we can also regularly buy some meat to nourish your body." Wei Rongxing brought a large bowl of rice from the stove and a piece of pickled vegetables from the vegetable tank, all of which were placed in front of him. Wei Tao turned around and retrieved an empty bowl, dividing the rice in half. "I ate a lot at the martial arts school at noon, and I can't finish this big bowl of rice." "Father, help me eat some," he said. "I had congee at night." Wei Rongxing rubbed his hands and refused halfway, but he was defeated by his firm eyes and reached out to pick up the dishes. "Has my mother and sister lived together in the jade workshop?" "Yeah, they manage food and drink there, earning more and being safe. It's good." Wei Rongxing ate quickly, and in just 2 sentences, he had already finished half a bowl of rice with pickled vegetables. "I have recently taken on a big job, and if it comes down to this, I can barely cover your 2 months' accommodation expenses in the martial arts school without having to go back and forth." "Which family's work did my father take on?" "Well, it seems that the client is a teacher. A few days ago, we bought a courtyard near the inner city. A few of our old colleagues went to help build houses and the furniture of the entire courtyard." Wei Tao nodded and emphasized, "I heard from the teacher that the city hasn't been very peaceful lately, so it's better to be careful when going out." "I know, the gentleman also mentioned that there seems to be a war going on outside, and there are also many bandits and bandits." Wei Rongxing waited for him to finish his meal, blew out the oil lamp, and began to tidy up the utensils under the dim moonlight. "Don't worry, we come and go together with a few people. We'll come back before dark, and there won't be any problems," he said. "The night is getting deeper." Wei Tao lay in bed, recalling the brutal battle that had occurred in the alley time and time again in his mind. More than a dozen living lives turned into cold corpses in an instant. A ray of moonlight shone through the window gap, leaving a straight mark on his cheek like a sword blade. This is the chaotic world. Human life is even lower than grass and trees. Without truly powerful strength, one may face the threat of death at any time. For a long time, he restrained his complicated and chaotic emotions, quietly pushed open the door and came into the yard. Pick up the homemade stone lock and start practicing again and again. Qi and blood are perceived during operation. Then it operates more skillfully. Suddenly, the sound of opening the gate and releasing water suddenly rang out between the hands. Unconsciously, Wei Tao regained the energy and blood of his hands. Two streams of heat meander beneath the skin, surround along the mirrored path for one circle, finally, it condenses in the center of the palm. He moved his heart, his hands clasped together, and his palms met. The sound was a crisp clash of jade and stones. The palm is as red as blood, and the touch is as hard as a stone. I spent over 2 months, and with the help of the progress improvement of the upstream stone fist, I finally pushed open the door of the red line fist before the deadline by watching the battle tonight and gaining some insights. Wei Tao slowly opened his eyes. A hint of joy flashed in his eyes. Shwa shwa shwa. Beside the hot pot, Wei Tao continuously plunged his arms deep into it. Qi and blood quickly converge in the palm of the hand, and then remain stable in a bright red and hard state like a stone. He can clearly feel that his effectiveness in absorbing medicinal powder has at least doubled compared to before. And the chain reaction it brings is enough to change the overall effect of cultivation. After practicing 2 sets of frosting, Wei Tao slowly dissipated his palm qi and blood, and came to the nearby stone bench to rest. Many people on the field were still practicing under the scorching sun, and no one had the heart to speak. Only Wang Lianshan was swaying left and right there, muttering to more than one person, unsure of what he was saying. Today, the second senior sister on duty is guiding the practice. Except for standing beside Wang Lianshan and giving some guidance at the beginning, she sits alone under the shade of a tree, with her eyes closed and her demeanor kept away from strangers. Wei Tao naturally did not report his breakthrough ideas to her. Until the next day, senior brother Tan Pan appeared on the martial arts training ground. Wei Tao practiced in the iron sand for half an hour before arriving at the stone lock area in the corner. After using gold coins to directly advance to the stage of entering the room, and after more than a month of non-stop practice, he has further improved the maturity level of Yusher Fist, reaching a perfect level of 70%. Under his control, the stone lock flipped up and down, very agile, as if it had its own life. Tan Pan quickly caught his attention and approached with great interest. As time passed, his eyes became brighter and brighter. Especially when Wei Tao raised his palm and lifted the heavy stone lock with one hand, spinning rapidly, making a sound of collision and friction between gold and jade, he couldn't help but stroke his palm and let out a good cry. Senior brother. Wei Tao lowered the stone lock and bowed with his fists. Tan Pan's gaze fell on his hand and he smiled as he said, Junior brother Wei, do you know that you have already exceeded the entry-level standard? Ah, have I actually started yet? Wei Tao was taken aback for a moment, and then a surprised expression slowly appeared on his face. He originally intended to wait until Peng Yu was on duty and then make it clear that he had reached the entry-level standard, which would save him a lot of trouble. After all, among the 6 formal disciples in the inner courtyard, he was the closest to Peng Yu, who also came from a poor background. Not only was it a common secret of killing and sharing money on the first day of apprenticeship, but also because after that day, he would occasionally use the money he received at that time to invite Peng Yu out to sit down and chat with Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com for a few drinks to strengthen their relationship. As the saying goes, the deeper the relationship goes, the shallower it becomes. Especially when the status of both parties is unequal, maintaining a relationship requires paying a higher price. Whether in the pre-time modern society or in the post-time world, the relationships between people are roughly the same. And what Ping Yu said a few days ago at the Xiaobai building made him vaguely aware that finding the senior brother should also have the same effect. Wei, junior brother, come with me to the inner courtyard to meet the teacher. Tan Pan walked towards the inner courtyard and said with a smile, Senior brother Peng has mentioned you more than once in front of me. Now it seems that his vision is quite good. On the martial arts training ground, Wang Lianshan suddenly pulled his arms out of the iron sand and watched the two of them enter the inner courtyard with a pensive expression. Oh, after observing for so many days, I actually glanced away. Wang Lianshan turned around and looked at the named disciple beside him, suddenly laughing out loud. I thought he hadn't been able to jump for a few days, but I didn't expect him to meet the entry-level requirements at the last moment. He even rushed in front of me and entered the inner courtyard, becoming the seventh disciple of the Red Thread sect. His eyes were cold and his expression was completely different from that of a teenager aged 15 or 16. However, Wang Lianshan doesn't really like the number 8, he said. Wang Xiao, has Wei Tao met the entry-level requirements? Aren't you going to see it yourself? Wang Lianshan restrained his smile and once again, a restless and anxious mood appeared in his eyes. He lightly touched his palms and made a crisp sound like the clash of gold and iron. Just now, my mood was turbulent and my blood was surging. By chance, even I reached the entry-level standard. On the martial arts training ground, a group of named disciples suddenly cast envious and jealous gazes. Chapter 9. Power. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The inner courtyard of the martial arts school. Today is a good day. Early in the morning, two named disciples met the beginner's requirements for my red thread fist. Master Zhou sat upright on the grand tutor's chair, looking at the two people below with a smile on his face. He picked up a teacup and took a light sip. According to the old rules, Wei Tao ranks 7th, while Wang Lianshan ranks 8th. Starting today, he entered the inner courtyard and officially became a disciple of our sect. He looked around and his gaze fell on Tan Pan. As the eldest senior brother, you usually bring two new junior brothers with you. You need to explain the rules clearly and remind them of the things you need to pay attention to. Yes, teacher. Tan Pan nodded. Xiao Wu and Xiao Liuzi are out on business, so Ying Shui, take someone to get some wine and vegetables and come back to celebrate their entry. The tall woman standing still on the side bowed slightly and left the inner courtyard. After explaining the matter, Master Zhou walked slowly into the room with his hands behind his back and slammed the door shut. The others immediately dispersed, only Tan Pan stayed behind. Our gate has only 3 rules. One is not to deceive teachers and destroy ancestors, the second is not to harm each other from the same family, the third is not to disclose the true story. Do you remember? Wei Tao nodded, thinking that the rules of the sect were indeed so simple that they could not be simpler. It is said to be 3 points, but in fact, it can be summarized as 2 points. That is to keep secrets and not hit oneself. The rest were not mentioned at all. Tan Pan glanced at the two and cleared his throat before continuing. Since the teacher asked me to remind you of the precautions, I will say 2 more words and you should remember them well. The first thing to know is that a martial arts school is a martial arts school, and the red line gate is the red line gate. These two cannot be confused. Entering the inner courtyard, even a true red line disciple has a fundamental difference in identity from the named disciples of the martial arts school outside. The relationship between those named disciples outside and the martial arts school is very simple. They pay in exchange for opportunities to practice martial arts, that's all. You are different. In the future, whenever you need to practice, you will receive it for free from the library on a regular basis. However, as a member of the Red Line sect, you must work for your sect and perform the tasks assigned by the sect. Especially when you step out of this courtyard, your words, actions, and every move naturally connect with our sect, forming a network of mutual assistance, progress, and retreat. Tan Pan looked up at the slightly gloomy sky, with a slightly ambiguous smile on his lips. In addition, countless people live inside the inner and outer cities, as well as hundreds of miles of ground centered around Sangyuan City. The intricate relationships between people and the intertwined entanglements between people's forces also form a larger but invisible web. We are all on this online platform, and the difference is the position we occupy. Some are at the center, some are at the edges. The impact on the entire network is also different at this point. Tan Pan restrained his smile and increased his tone of voice, so when you walk outside, you still need to be careful and not be too arrogant just because you are a disciple of the martial arts school. After all, in the entire Sangyuan city, we are not considered the people who occupy the central position, and not everything can be easily handled. 8th junior brother should be very clear about this. Wang Lianshan exhaled a long, murky breath, and his voice trembled inexplicably as he spoke. The three major factions in the inner city, Mr. Hu in the outer city, are definitely not to be provoked. Other martial arts such as Hidden Blade Society, Iron-Legged Sect, and Mountain Armor Sect all have true methods of internal chi and blood cultivation taught, which are on par with us. Pay attention to their core members. They can give each other face when encountering each other. As for other lower-level scattered gangs, they are diligent in changing one after another, so it's not necessary to take them too seriously. Tan Panpa nodded in approval and added, there is also the Fonglin military town stationed 100 miles south of the city, as well as the Moon Shadow Temple located deep in the Kangmang Mountain. Although it is rare to see their appearance on weekdays, they still possess strength comparable to the three major players in the inner city. Wei Tao has been listening quietly, keeping important things in mind. Until Wang Yingxue, the second senior sister who went out to buy wine and vegetables, returned, Tan Pan stopped and began arranging to set up wine, cloth, and dishes, calling on everyone to take their seats one by one. Bang, bang, bang. In the inner courtyard of the martial arts school, Wei Tao's hands turned pale. With different postures and movements, he kept changing his footwork and posture, hitting the wooden dummy in front of him. His movements are not fierce or fast, and he always strives to focus accurately and better perceive the movement of qi and blood. After practicing dozens of times, he slowly put down his shelf and carefully recalled the little moments of qi and blood circulation just now. This is the true internal training method of Red Thread Fist, which requires a much higher level of qi and blood circulation than before. In addition, there are also body movements that are coordinated with internal training methods. Master Zhou also gave it a pleasant name, called Blood Jade Hammer. The meaning is that the skin color is bright red like blood and hard like stone like jade. Red Line Fist has both offensive and defensive techniques, complex and numerous moves, and extremely high requirements for body movements. It also needs to be in line with the movement of qi and blood, which is much more complex than the basic skills learned during the training of named disciples. Shua. Wei Tao remained calm and focused, and the complex golden talisman reappeared in his sight. I need to teach the true transmission of Red Line Fist, and finally a progress bar about Red Line Fist appears in the status bar. It can be considered that we are on the right track, no longer the situation where we were not allowed to enter before. Staring at the progress bar that had just started for a long time, Wei Tao felt a hint of regret. Regretting that I was too excited to know the function of gold coins for the first time and used 5 of them on the Yusher Fist, leaving only 2 in my hand. Even after 2 months of accumulation, it only increased to 4. In his opinion, the real difficulty lies in the cultivation of the techniques used in the practice of Red Thread Fist. After starting the cultivation of forging skin, refining tendons, coagulation, and red lines layer by layer, it is time to truly need gold coins to play a role. This is the optimal choice for maximizing benefits. However, taking a step back, if I had not chosen to improve the cultivation progress of Yusher Fist at that time, and with the help of this practice method, I could perceive the circulation of qi and blood. Whether he can meet the entry-level requirements of Red Line Fist is still unknown, so even with more coins, there is no room for further use. After thinking silently for a moment, Wei Tao restrained his thoughts and quickly walked to the iron pot standing in the center of the outer courtyard. I first asked someone to add some medicinal powder inside, and then guided those named disciples on the key points of perceiving qi and blood during external practice of sanding, which can be considered as completing today's task on duty. Not far away, several named disciples are sitting, resting and chatting. Do you know that a big event happened in Changelfang recently? Find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, isn't that Uncle Suachi's place? Is there anyone in the outer city who dares to cause trouble there? Could it be that Changelfang and Hidden Sword Society have started working again? How could it be a hidden sword meeting? Did you forget that the young master of the Huang family came forward and called both sides together long ago to make peace? Oh, I remember, you keep talking. I heard that there were 2 loaches swimming from elsewhere who went to Suachi's farm to catch shrimp, but ended up directly touching Huang Gongzi who came to play. Making Huang Gongzi lose face in his own yard, Suachi couldn't help but grab those 2 loaches and cut them alive in a pot. That's right, Suachi did send someone to catch it, but he didn't expect it to be not a loach touching shrimp, but 2 venomous snakes killing people. The dozen or so subordinates sent out didn't see anyone alive or dead, and didn't even have anyone to report back. Really, those 2 guys are so amazing. Have you found them now? No, Suachi mobilized almost all personnel to investigate. As a result, only their last appearance was found in a small alley on the outskirts of the outer city. But the traces have already been cleared early by someone, leaving no clues, is it true or not? Someone is so bold. Not only did they slap Uncle Suachi heavily in the face, but they even humiliated Huang Gongzi. Pop. Several speaking disciples were struck by Liuji. You've all practiced your martial arts, haven't you? I'll check one by one later, and if anyone doesn't meet the requirements, don't eat at noon. Wei Tao's face was serious, and the willow branches in his hands were swinging with a snap. The disciples sitting on the ground resting dispersed in a crowd. Find your own spot and practice quickly. Chapter 10. Harmony and Virtue. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The sunset slowly sets. About to disappear into the depths of the mountains. The sky gradually darkened. Cooking smoke rises one after another, and the air is filled with the aroma of various foods. Wei Tao finished his day of hard work and went to finish the daily affairs of the martial arts school. He arranged for the materials to be purchased tomorrow morning before leaving the door before dark night fell. 15 minutes later, he turned out of the long street and crossed narrow paths before finally arriving at the entrance of Yaoshe Lane. Suddenly, a faint noise came from afar. The voice was mainly composed of women crying, interspersed with men impatiently cursing. Wei Tao turned his head to look at the sound. Recognized that it was the house where a young couple who had recently moved and lived. As she passed by the door of the house, the woman's crying suddenly increased by an order of magnitude and turned into a hoarse cry. Immediately after, there was a crisp sound, and a hoarse man spoke harshly, "It is only natural for us to owe money. If we cannot afford it, we can only let your woman follow us. Whether we make her a slave or send her to the kiln to show off, it has nothing to do with you. Poor couples mourn for many things. But repaying debts is indeed a matter of course." Wei Tao had seen many similar things and had little interest in managing them, so he quickened his pace and walked towards his own home. The woman cried and shouted, "When we borrowed money, we agreed to borrow 10 and pay 12 and 20% interest, but now you're saying 9 out and 13 out, which clearly means we're stealing money." Bang! The gate of this house was knocked open. A disheveled woman flew out of the alley and landed heavily on the gravel road in the center. Wei Tao stopped and turned around to look. Just glanced at the man who had just walked out the door. That person has a face full of flesh, a tall and muscular figure, with high and bulging muscles on his shoulders and arms, giving off a fierce and brutal feeling at first glance. Wei Tao frowned slightly and recognized the other person's identity. Although I don't know the specific name, I know this person's nickname is Black Crow. He was originally a small leader of the Wei gang and used to wander around near Yaoshe Lane. A neighbor's family had already been extorted by Black Crows, but later had to be dealt with through the medicine gang. Even so, I lost a sum of silver money, which is equivalent to half a month of going to the mountains to pick herbs all in vain. Then the Wei gang was destroyed, and the Black Crow disappeared for a period of time. Unexpectedly, it reappeared now and even started buying and selling high-interest loans. Behind the Black Crow, there were also several men in black. Their clothes around their waist were bulging, and they didn't know what weapon they were carrying. The Black Crow was about to go up and grab the woman's hair when he suddenly saw Wei Tao standing still a few steps away, which made him slightly stunned. At first, his gaze was fierce and warning, but then there was a hint of doubt and uncertainty in his expression. Staring at the red cloud-patterned lines on Wei Tao's training suit shoulders and cuffs for a few moments, the Black Crow moved its mouth as if wanting to say something, but in the end, it just bowed with a fist and turned around to leave. The few men behind walked away quickly, not even daring to lift their heads. As a former member of the Wei gang, upon seeing the black and red patterned training suit, Black Crow quickly recognized the identity of the young man in front of him. If they were only named disciples of the Red Thread Martial Arts School, they wouldn't be afraid, but the black background and red stripes represent disciples passed down from the inner courtyard, which has completely changed the situation. Even in the entire outer city, the Red Line Martial Arts School can be considered a moderate upward force. Although not comparable to those large guilds closely related to the inner city, it is by no means a presence that people like him can provoke. Wei Tao dissipated his running qi and blood, watching the few people leave expressionlessly without saying a word from beginning to end. If there is really a fight, it's okay if the other party doesn't use sharp tools. If a few people rush forward with knives, it's really hard to say who will leave alive in the end. The woman behind her was still sobbing softly, and the sound of crying spread far away in the gradually darkening night. Other households are tightly closed, and no one dares to come out and take a glance. This is the current situation on the outskirts of the outer city. Residents are like soaking in a cold mud pond, never knowing when they will sink to the bottom and turn into even colder corpses. When I returned home, the table had already been set with food. Soup is boiled wild vegetables in water. The dish is a cold mixed wild vegetable. The staple food is still wild vegetable dumplings. This is what our family often eats in autumn. Saving a little during this time period is necessary in order to save enough money and food to survive the harsh winter of heavy snow and mountains. Wei Rongxing lifted the lid of the pot and placed a large bowl of stewed meat in front of Wei Tao. Then I poured him a small bowl of xiaojiu. Brother Tao works hard all day and should eat more meat to supplement his strength. I had a full lunch at the martial arts school, and my father also ate. Wei Tao tried to push back the meat bowl, but was firmly stopped by Wei Rongxing. You eat, I'll just eat wild vegetables, and I don't have to work at night. As he spoke, he picked up the wooden bowl at hand and swallowed the boiled wild vegetable soup in just a few bites. Today I saw the Black Crow from the previous Wei gang. Wei Tao could only pick up a chopstick of stewed meat and eat it, sipping his wine and casually saying, "Oh, he joined the Youth Cooperation Association, and now this small area can be considered their sphere of influence," Wei Rongxing said. After pausing for a moment, he added, "This person came home in the afternoon and collected 8 large sums of protection money. Received 8 large sums of protection money from our family." Wei Tao squinted his eyes, his face flickering in the light of the oil lamp. "Yeah, when the Wei gang was here before, it used to be 6 big coins per month. Now it's changed to the Youth Cooperation Association, and it's increased by 2 more. Wei Rongxing picked up a wild vegetable ball, skillfully broke it in half, and picked up some pickled vegetables to eat. "There's no way, just pay for peace, but these are all trivial matters that don't need you to worry about. Just focus on cultivating in the martial arts school." Wei Tao nodded and drank all the xiaojiu in his bowl, pushing the remaining half of the stewed meat back to the middle of the table. I'm full now, let's eat this meat, father, he said. I'm not hungry, just eat some wild vegetables. Wei Rongxing still refused, but Wei Tao had already stood up and walked out the door, so he had to bring the bowl of stewed meat in front of him. After dinner, Wei Tao slowly punched a few times in the cramped courtyard, wiped his body with a damp towel, and returned to his small stone house to lie down and sleep. Perhaps due to the recent heavy rain and fog, the room is damp and emits a faint musty smell. Wei Tao opened the window, and the moonlight slanted towards the corner of the wall, coating the green moss with a faint bright color. We need to find a way to get some money, at least we can't keep living in such conditions. There is also the Youth Cooperation Association. If you go to the martial arts school tomorrow, you can ask senior brother Peng to see what their origins are. Looking up at the crescent moon hanging in the night sky, countless thoughts flashed through Wei Tao's heart, until I fell asleep unconsciously. The Youth Cooperation Association. Peng Yu finished practicing a set of punches and picked up a towel to wipe away his sweat. He frowned and thought for a moment, but ultimately shook his head. I haven't heard of the name of this gang. Wei Tao poured cold tea for the two and couldn't help but pause upon hearing the movements of his hands. Haven't you even heard of senior brother Peng? For such unknown low-level small guilds, it's normal if I haven't heard of them at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but it's not normal if I have heard of them. Peng Yu chuckled and said nonchalantly, Junior Brother 7, just go find their leader directly. There's not much to consider. Wei Tao was slightly surprised and said, I haven't investigated how many people there are and what level of strength the leader is. Junior Brother 7, you misunderstood my meaning. Let's make a living in Sangyuan City, always thinking about how to fight and kill. Harmony is of utmost importance in everything, and only those who are virtuous can be trusted. Harmony is precious, and virtue is enough to win people over. Wei Tao took a deep breath and looked puzzled. Peng Yu picked up a large tea cup and drank it all in one gulp, casually chewing the tea leaves into the mouth. To prioritize peace is to make them deeply realize the importance of maintaining a peaceful and good relationship with us. As for conquering others with virtue, as disciples of the Red Thread sect, we naturally speak of strong and abundant martial arts ethics. Of course, I didn't ask you to go directly and pick out their lair. We are martial arts practitioners, not bandits who like to fight and kill. What I mean is to ask you to go talk to their meeting leader, which can also be considered an alternative form of bowing to the doc. As long as the members of the Youth Cooperation Association are not a group of idiots, they will naturally know what to do later. Actually, according to the usual situation, it should have been the Qinghe Association going to pay respects to your doc, Junior Brother 7. It could be that they are not familiar with the business they just took over, or it could be that they do not know the identity of their junior brother. That's why I made such a mistake. At this point, junior brother will go and give them some advice, so as not to encounter it again in the future. Does it make everyone lose face?